After your students have completed the FSA, you'll go to that FSA and open the Responses tab. Clicking on the Responses screen, you're going to see all of your students and classes. If you have multiple classes that took the FSA, you'll just open them up and see the students who took it in each class. You can score one student at a time, or you can score a bunch of students at once by going one question at a time. So to start off, I'm going to grade just one student by clicking on their name. When I look over here on the right, I'll see that this student has answered both questions and they currently have 0 points. So the first one says, convince the reader of your response. Why? Coke versus Pepsi. Well, this student, they gave me something, but it certainly wasn't to convince me necessarily. So I'm going to give this student 3 out of the 10 points. If you're using a rubric, obviously you would score it on the rubric and then assign that number of points here. So in this particular one, they gave me the answer. They gave me a little explanation, but I think there could have been more done. I'll give the student a 4 out of 10 for question number 2. You'll see as I score it that over here, this score updates. The colors will populate based on my color settings that I have in my personal account settings. And I can see that this student has a 35% overall. If I prefer to do a bunch of students at once, I can select the question number at the top. And now all of their questions, their responses, are going to show up for question 1. So since these are all open-ended questions, I'm probably still going to score them all, one at a time, but I can also do some batch scoring. I'm going to go down here to the bottom and I see that, this student and this student and this student, they all gave me, their reason. They also gave me their choice. So I'm going to select all 3 students by selecting this checkbox here. And this time I can either type the number of points in or I can slide the slider. I'm going to give these students 8 out of 10 points. If I wanted to, I could also go to the bottom and type feedback to these 3 students. I could say, good job. Next time, I would like to see a little more evidence to support your argument. And then I would click right here to send, and all 3 students would get that feedback. After I've scored those, I'll X out of there, and then I'll see that these students now have a score. I can then select this student, and Ross just gave me this, didn't give me much else, so I'll just give 1 point for responding. And then if I go back to the top, you'll see that this student has a lot of writing. But this student also has this little exclamation mark right here. And when I click on that, I'll notice it says this response includes copy and pasted parts. If I go to the details, it will show me that this whole entire text has actually been pasted into this response. Therefore, this student has taken this from another source. If your students are allowed to type it out in a different document, it's possible they would copy and paste there. In this particular one, I gave it to them in Secure Exam Browser. I know that they couldn't possibly have taken this from another website or, from another document. Maybe somehow they had it saved ahead of time, but it's unlikely. So you have to consider that when scoring is watching for that particular alert. But in this case, this student actually has a very, very well thought out response. And while they do have copy and pasted parts, they must have done this from somewhere within the formative itself because they cannot leave the browser in secure exam browser mode. So I've given them 10 points and then I will X out there. To keep going, I go to question 2, and in this case, I'm going to select one kiddo, And then again, this time I think I'll select all because I see that most of the students are going to get a similar score. This probably is not the case on an FSA, but for just a quick grading tip or trick, I can see this student's going to get more and this one's already graded, but let's say everybody else is pretty close. All right, again, it looks like Ross is here, so I'll just do these three. I'm going to give these students all the same number of points. And then I X out. And then Ross, again, only answered a little bit. I'm going to give Ross 1 point. And then up here at the top, this time I notice, well, they still have that exclamation. They must have put it somewhere else because, maybe they typed it in a different question and then moved it. I'm not sure, but since they are in exam browser mode, secure exam browser mode, I know they did not copy and paste it. I will give them full credit. And then when I go back to the totals, I'll see that this class is now fully graded. I see that I gave feedback on these three, and I can also change how I look at the data. So let's say that I would prefer to see it, in a different way. I can change up the settings here. I can sort it based on how I'd like to see it. I can even group it by standards if I have done that. And then I also can see, the overall averages, and the colors help me kind of get a good eyeball on where the scores fell. This is the average for the class, and had I graded the other classes as well, this would be the average for all of the students who took this particular FSA and have been scored.